Disaster prepping, Emcomm, emergency communications. How useful is ham radio for preppers in a real disaster? This is another story I found on Reddit. It's very similar to the one I did earlier, but the original author who wrote this one makes some different points, a couple that are pretty valid, one that is just totally outlandish because I completely disagree with it, and a couple others that maybe we should think about. Let's go. As I said, I found this story on Reddit. This is Change My View, Change My Mind. Change My Mind, ham radio is a fantasy of disaster preppers. Now, I will say, I read through this story. I found this story this morning. I came out here to the shack to record a video, and this was not it. But hey, I found it, and this is a good article. Okay, so hats off to the author. This is a good article. A couple of key points you make are valid. One key point I don't agree with at all, and I'm going to explain why. And then in a couple other key points, I'm going to be like, well, okay, maybe, but let me see what the audience thinks. So you guys tell me what you think in the comments below. This is posted by Whiskey5SNX. I don't know if that's a ham radio call sign or not, but could be. Could be a ham radio call sign. I don't know. Anyway, this is Reddit name. Okay, here we go. I live in a hurricane region of the USA. I've been through multiple hurricanes, power outages, and situations with the National Guard roaming around my area. Not once did ham radio actually play a beneficial role in the experience. Okay. For the last hurricane, we didn't even lose cell phone service because the cell towers have generator backup. Cell batteries would start to run down, use a portable lithium-ion battery packs to charge them back up. Those run down, start up the car, and charge those up. Okay, I'm going to pick this apart as we go. So instead of, I was going to read the whole thing. Instead, I'm going to pick this apart as we go. So, number one, I have said in multiple videos in the past that I think your smartphone, your cell phone, where is my phone? It's in my pocket. Your cell phone should be part of your go bag, prepper pack, emergency communications plan. I don't think an emergency communications plan that throws this out the window is a good plan. If this works, use it. Wonderful. If that works, use it. There's nothing wrong with that, okay? However, in the Texas Snowmageddon of 2021, this wasn't even a hurricane, okay? I can't imagine what a hurricane would do. He talks more about hurricanes later in this article, so we're going to get to that. But in the Texas Snowmageddon of 2021, I have AT&T on my phone, and I have Verizon on my tablet. AT&T shut down completely. The temperatures were in single digits, high single digits, low to mid-teens. We didn't have any snow, but we had ice. At least where I was, there was ice. In other parts of the state, there was snow and ice, temperatures in single digits. Where I was located on Galveston Island, AT&T was useless. Come to find out later, they actually shut the network down on purpose because they gave access to FirstNet and first responders. They were giving priority to first responders, as they should. That's great. I have no problem with that, okay? But as an individual, myself, I could not use my AT&T cell service. My wife and I could text. We could not pull up any data on our phones, and we could not make phone calls. I tried to call her once. It was very garbled, very broken, kept dropping. No good. No good at all. Verizon worked fine. I was actually watching YouTube TV on my Verizon tablet when I was going to sleep at night. So Verizon worked great, but AT&T was non-existent. Now, in a case like that, the cell network's not actually down. The cell network is not available because they're giving it to first responders. Okay, so what if that happens? Ham radio could be a backup. We used ham radio as a backup for that event, actually. There wasn't any emergency. Nobody needed anything, but I was monitoring frequencies of local repeaters and simplex channels around the area, and we actually used it, okay? So, point number one, if your cell network is up and running and working, use it. Ham radio can be a backup to that in case, because I personally experienced a time where the cell network was not available, and it was not even during a hurricane. He goes on to say, okay, but what about hams in remote regions? Well, if they want to be prepared for an emergency, there's solar power and satellite internet now with global footprints. Yeah, satellite internet's kind of, well, depending on what you refer to, satellite phones are expensive. Satellite internet, like Starlink, yeah, that's an option. Okay, all right, let's keep going. What about floods? Okay, if the flood is significant enough for this to be relevant, your equipment is likely going to be underwater unless you're at elevation. Otherwise, sure, you got me. Might be handy in a flood or a tsunami. Okay, what about a Carrington event? Well, I doubt the efficacy of the ham bands during a major geomagnetic storm, assuming that you can operate your radio at all in such event. Now, I know what the Carrington event is, but for purposes of this video, we're going to look at this real quick and say, the Carrington event was the most intense geomagnetic storm in recorded history, peaking from 1 to 2 September of 1859, almost 200 years ago. During solar cycle 10, it created strong auroral displays that were reported globally and caused sparking and even fires in multiple telegraph stations. The geomagnetic storm was the most likely the result of the coronal mass ejection, CME, from the sun colliding with Earth's magnetosphere. Okay, so I'll put a link to this in the description below. You can go read more about that if you want to. Almost 200 years ago, a Carrington event happened. Does that mean it's going to happen again? Maybe. Does that mean it's likely? Likely not. Okay. Again, having ham radio is about preparing. If you have insurance on your home or car, then you're prepared for a disaster that you hope never happens. Okay? If you have concealed carry, then you're prepared for a situation that you hope never happens. Having ham radio is in a situation like this is very similar. He goes on, well, what about those guys that go hiking in the mountains and get lost? They get saved because of ham radio. Well, sure, I'll give you that one, because they are in a remote location with no infrastructure in place and no supporting agencies, and not likely to go backpacking with a UPS, a laptop, and a Starlink antenna. True. But I think that's kind of missing the point and cherry picking. There's also EPIRBs that still do this better than ham radio. EPIRB, I wasn't familiar with that acronym. Basically, it's a sat phone right here. There's sat phones on this website, satellitephonestore.com. So there we go right there. He's talking about satellite phones. Fine. Again, satellite phones are expensive. If you want to get a satellite phone and pay for it every month and never use it, go for it. Nothing wrong with that. I would actually like to have one. I would love to have a satellite phone. I don't have one because I've never needed one, and it's an expensive thing to pay for if you're never going to need it. Now, if you go hiking and lose cell service a lot, you get out into those areas a lot, maybe a satellite phone is something good for you. Garmin has, the InReach, where you can send text messages, like 10 or 12 text messages a month. You know, that's the thing. I know several soda guys that have one of those. And that's only like, I think it's like $15 a month or something like that. But a satellite phone's going to be more than that. So there is that option if you want to pay for it. Okay, fine. He goes on to say, but my city, okay, this is one of the points I do not agree with, okay? But my city and state needs me. He's saying that the preppers, he's quoting preppers here. But my city-state needs me, exclamation point times 3. He says, no, it doesn't. The state and local governments have dramatically improved their emergency communication systems compared to years gone by, and in many cases are reluctant to acknowledge that hams still exist. He is 100% correct. The city and state doesn't need you. They are reluctant to acknowledge that hams still exist, but he is missing the point here. Most ham radio operators I know, most prepper-type hams that I know, we don't have licenses because we think the city and state needs us. Okay, I'm speaking for myself here. Let me know if in the comments if you guys agree with this or not. Okay, think about this for a second. If I get a call from my city or state or one of the EOCs or something, and I'm called to help out and come sit and do net control, sure, I'm totally willing to do that. That's not why I have a ham radio license. That's not why I want to prepare with a ham radio license. I want to prepare to take care of me, my family, my folks who live only about 2 miles away from me, my neighbors next door and across the street who I know very well. I want to prepare to take care of me. I don't care. I do care, but in the situation of my city and state needing me, I don't really care if they do or not. My family comes first, my neighbors come first, my homestead comes first. I'm not preparing because I think my city and state needs me. I'm preparing because I need to be informed. I need to take personal responsibility and be self-reliant for my own communications. It doesn't have anything to do with city and state, in my opinion. And I know a lot of preppers, radio preppers. I don't know a lot of disaster preppers, doomsday prepper type people. I know a lot of sensible preppers and just kind of like logical preppers, for lack of a better term. I know a lot of guys who do prepping on a very logical scale, not a, hey, zombies are actually going to arrive tomorrow type scale. So those guys are my friends, and my community that I hang with are not worried, but more concerned about self-reliance than we are about city or state. So I don't think this statement really falls in line much, especially these doomsday disaster prep guys. They don't care about the city or state. They probably think the city and state's coming after them. They're probably going to think that the city and state are the ones causing this problem. And guess what? That could happen. He goes on, look, I get it. Part of the fun for you is saying that you're prepared for an emergency. If it's fun, then heck, go crazy. But to pretend like you're a key cog in the emergency communications plan for your county or state when the grid goes down is simply delusional. I agree with that statement. Again, go back to what I just said. That's not why I'm doing it. I don't really care about my city and state or county. I care about them, but they come second, okay? So he puts an edit down here at the bottom, okay, and which is good, which falls in line with this. My mind has been changed in that for the very specific and limited use cases, I see the point. Thanks to our emergency personnel for enlightening me. For the historical Hurricane Katrina, I was going to bring that up before I read this. Hurricane Katrina and similar use cases that were famous in their time. I'm still convinced that these are relegated to days gone by. This is also the majority of what I see is being discussed. So then the majority of Emcomms as it relates to this kind of use is a fantasy of a bygone area. I don't really agree with that either, but for Hurricane Katrina, I knew several guys that went down there when that storm happened. The hurricane not only wiped out power to the New Orleans area, wiped out cell towers, okay? He's talking about flooding and whatnot. So ham radio helped after the fact because hams went into the area to set up antennas, HF antennas, and send messages into and out of the affected area with no power and no communications. The same thing happened in Puerto Rico a few years back when that whole island was part of that island was without power for 8 or 9 months. No internet, no power. Yeah, sure, you got batteries and solar, great. Use that. Absolutely use batteries and solar backup. But if you're without power for 8 or 9 months, as Puerto Rico was just a few years ago, wasn't even that long ago. This was well into the 21st century. Parts of Puerto Rico was without power for a long, long time. You get a few storms coming through there, and you get 2 or 3 days in a row that you don't have enough sun to recharge your batteries to grab solar, and you're dead. You're dead in the water as far as power goes. So you got to take that into account as well. You got enough power to support your entire home for a week and a half, or your entire neighborhood or city. I mean, and ham radio takes a lot less power consumption than a satellite phone or than an entire repeater and cell phone site. Now, I do agree with him. There are a lot of preppers out there that think that this is the end-all, be-all, and it's going to solve all the problems. That's just not the case. But ham radio is a fantastic backup source of communications that will be needed in certain times. Okay, after 9/11 happened, same kind of thing because of cell towers being down and because of people making phone calls all at the same time. Now, most of these comments on this, this article has several comments on it. I don't see 140 comments right there. Okay, most of them are TLDR. Most of these comments, people get kind of chatty with the keyboard, and that's cool. That's cool. I will link this article in the description below, and you can go read it here. But I wanted to read the first comment to you. But first, let me tell you about Ham Radio Prep. If you're serious about getting your ham radio license, you can save a 20% discount on hamradioprep.com with the coupon code of Jason20. Download their free app on your iOS or Android device. Get started today. Get your technician license, get your general and your extra. Buy the package to get everything at once and get a 20% discount off the package, or buy them one at a time, which ends up being higher in the long run. They do not expire. When the question pool changes every year, you get free access to the new question pool. So if you don't do it today, if you're kind of dragging your feet about upgrading, don't worry about that. hamradioprep.com. Check out the link in the description below. Thank you for supporting this channel. The first commenter is Zap_P25. P25, okay, we know what this dude's going to be talking about. In a way, many think of it, yes. However, I'm writing an ICS 205 for our regional Aries Races group right now in preparation for the Eclipse 2024, which is just about a month and a half at the time of this recording. I run a multi-million-dollar Motorola P25 system and can fall back to the legacy conventional systems, which are still maintained for that purpose in the event that we go into site trunking county-wide, or worse, fail-soft. Skip site trunking altogether when tropo ducting is right in the spring and go straight to fail-soft. Everything has UPS backup. Everything had generator backup, though I don't trust the generators to actually start when they are needed, as they are notorious for failing to start. Yeah, if you have generator and solar backup at a site and it's not maintained well, then it doesn't do you any good anyway. About 6 months ago, we had a structure fire in our largest city that resulted in a U.S. highway getting shut down right at the only crossing in the county due to the structure fire essentially being less than 100 yards away, and emergency personnel couldn't work safely with it open to traffic or to stage equipment appropriately. During this incident, not only did Verizon, T-Mobile, and AT&T become overloaded due to oversubscription, even those of us with preemption because we had the Frontline or FirstNet subscribers couldn't even use cellular services. At one point, we were being merged into active calls party line style because things were so overloaded. Planning for that level of overloading during eclipse due to being in the path of totality and expecting 110,000 visitors to the county for an event in a county that has a population of 50,000 people. So yeah, EMCs, emergency management coordinators, are coordinating with amateur operators in the event that cellular network does crash. Staging operators in the EOCs so things can be relayed if needed between hospitals, and trying to keep someone with comms capability, whether it be amateur or public safety, in the most residential areas, because the last thing we want is a resident having an issue and unable to reach emergency services because all the people who want are stopping by on the side of and on everywhere else to watch a total eclipse for 4 minutes. So people stopping in the town watching the eclipse. Can you tell we are concerned? Especially since most of our fire and EMS services are volunteers or work for the county part-time when they are off at their full-time fire and EMS gigs. So it's important to understand that it's not necessarily a cell phone outage. I mean, the original poster makes a good point when he says that, yeah, most cell sites have battery backup, generator backup, assuming the generator starts correctly, assuming those batteries are maintained correctly, assuming that backup system is actively tested and maintained. Great. Most cell sites do have that type of backup. However, in my own personal experience, we were without power for almost 3 days on the island of Galveston. Now, it was cold outside, but there was not wind, there was not rain or snow. It was actually sunny and bright outside. It was just like 12 to 15 degrees most of the time during the day. And we were without power for almost 3 days and no cell service at all on AT&T because AT&T turned off the network for residential and normal subscribers and gave all the access to FirstNet. Again, I don't have a huge problem with that, okay? Emergency personnel, first responders, they need to be able to communicate when some of the rest of us don't. But what would I have done if I didn't have a Verizon network next to me? Most people probably don't have 2 or 3 networks. You got AT&T, you got T-Mobile, you got Verizon, and a few others that piggyback onto those, and maybe 1 or 2 other. I'm talking inside the USA. Outside the USA, there's a lot more than that. Okay, but how many of you actually pay for a smartphone or a cell phone plan from 2 or 3 providers and pay that bill every month? Most people probably don't do that. So if your network is the one that gets chosen to be shut down due to give access to FirstNet or first responders, what are you going to do? Ham radio, even GMRS radio, even CB radio is a fantastic backup source for when those things happen. And they do happen. As I said, it personally happened to me in 2021. So what do you think about this article? Again, I will put a link in the description below. I don't think he's entirely wrong. I think 1 or 2 of his points are missing the point, but I also don't think that the disaster preppers who think that the whole world's going to burn tomorrow and zombies are going to come crawling out of the ash. Those guys, that's a little bit unrealistic. Okay, let's just face it. That's a little bit unrealistic. But at the same time, what if it's the authorities or the government or the cell phone networks or the big corporations? What if those are the guys who are causing the havoc? What if something nefarious is going on, trying to subjugate the citizens of a country or a city or a state? What if there's malicious intent from corporations and governing bodies somewhere? I'm not naming any names, okay? How are you going to communicate? You are still depending on someone else to keep that network up and going, whether it be satellites, whether it be cell towers, whether it be internet, whether it be 4G, 5G, whether it be whatever. You are depending on someone else to keep that network going. Ham radio does not require, GMRS radio, CB radio, same thing. Radio does not require a network. We can talk radio to radio across the county, across the state, across the nation, overseas, and not have to worry about someone else maintaining a network that we don't have direct control over. Put a comment below. Let me know what you think.